was just a boy, I would think about the day when I leave this town and set out for the shining lights that never let me down. So I got on a ship with 22 bucks and a searching soul. I'm going to the promised land where streets are paved with gold.
Welcome to Hometown Chronicles USA, the podcast where every small town and city across the nation has a story to tell. Join us as we uncover the rich tapestry of America's historical sites, weaving together the echoes of the past with the vibrancy of present-day happenings. From forgotten landmarks to bustling community events, we dive into the people who shape their hometowns, those who have been pivotal in building their community's legacy, and those carrying it boldly into the future. Each episode celebrates the resilience, culture, and spirit of those local stories, highlighting the unique heartbeat of every corner of the country. Whether it's historic Main Street, a thriving local business, or a tradition passed down through generations, Hometown Chronicles USA brings you closer to the places that make America extraordinary, one community at a time.
But when I set foot on that newfound ground, I could feel the truth. I could be a shining star like the great Bambino Bay. Look at me, I'm chasing the American dream. Even if it wasn't quite what I thought it'd be.
All right, what's up, everybody? Frederick Murphy here with History Before Us, one half of Hometown Chronicles USA. Here with my co-host Kyle with Preserving Spaces, and we have a very special guest, Ali Rivera, all the way up in Indiana, Richmond to be exact. And we tried this before, and this guy, and I'm talking about myself, I didn't hit record. So we were bumping our gums for about 45 minutes. But we had a couple other things. We had bread that was being baked and timers going off and everything. Yes. And so, you know, maybe this was the way that the creator intended today's episode to work, if you will. Yes. But Ali is with the James Vester Miller Trail, which is there in Asheville, North Carolina, which was most definitely a labor of love as well as ancestral connectivity. So, Ali, I would love for you to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Yes, my name is Ali Rivera. I live in Richmond, Indiana. I'm a mom, a wife. I have 2 daughters. And in my free time, I focus on ancestry and working on the James Vester Historical Trail. I'm also a metalsmith by trade, and so I spend a lot of time doing that as well in my home studio. But my love is really focusing on my lineage and continuing to try to get out the word about his legacy and the buildings in Asheville. So I'm happy to be here today.
Most definitely. And like with all tragedies, you know, I think that we couldn't start this off without, you know, just recognizing the unfortunate times that the people there in Western North Carolina and other parts of the country have been dealing with, as it relates to the fires in California and then the flooding and the hurricane there, and these areas in which we know and we love, that we are able to pull so much out of it via being outdoorsmen and just enjoying nature in general. And so definitely have everyone in our thoughts and prayers for sure still to this day. So I mean, we're talking about James Vester Miller, so I think that it's only right that we kind of discuss who that person is. So do you mind delving into that for us?
Certainly. James was born in 1860 in Rutherfordton, North Carolina. His mother, Louisa, was enslaved, and James, his biological father, was a white slave master. She eventually took 3 of her kids to Asheville when he was around between 8 and 10 years old. Oral history states that he only went to school up until like 3rd grade, and hung out at construction sites and kind of learned the skill and the trade of being a mason, and eventually started his own company. Got married to a woman named Violet Petty, and when he started Miller and Sons Construction Company, it was a really tough time in that era. A lot of building, a lot of white folk were building. They had all the money, so trying to get his foot in the door to win a lot of the bids to do these, the construction of a lot of these buildings and churches and homes was, I'm sure, very difficult for him, but he did it, and he won bids over white counterparts, and obviously that was due to his skill and knowledge. So it's a really interesting story behind what he had to go through. Of course, this was during, pretty much after Reconstruction, during, getting into Jim Crow, and so it was a very tough time for him, but he did it, and the landscape and the cityscape of Asheville is proof of that.
Was there anything in particular, or, how long did you know this information about your family history?
I was made aware of all of this about a little over 5.5 years ago.
Okay, so fairly
and
recent.
That was, this isn't something that, this was all my dad's father's side, so we didn't know any of this information. My dad passed away in 2016. I did a DNA test, wanted to learn more about my dad's father's side of the family, and then so all the pieces started coming together, and I learned of all this amazing information about my people in Asheville. So it this story of James Miller and what he did to Asheville is in itself notable to be learned. For me, being the great-granddaughter of him and just learning of this 5-6 years ago almost, it is overwhelming and an honor to be involved in it at this part of my life. So that's what keeps me going.
After you learned about your connection with James Vester Miller, how did you get involved with the walking trail?
So, interestingly, Andrea Clark, my cousin, who's the one who put this all together, it was her vision for about 20 years, apparently, and nobody seemed to be too interested in it. Until about 2018, 2019, when she started, getting grants available to her to do this. I mean, it's a free walkable trail, so it's not like it cost a ton of money, but to get the maps and the plaques and stuff together like that did cost some money. But I had reached out to her on Ancestry, and it took about a year before I got a response. And one day I get a response from a woman who was her friend, who was a genealogist, who sent me an email and said, "Hey, who are you? We don't know anybody named this guy," because my dad's name wasn't really his real name, or his father's grandfather. My grandfather wasn't really his name. So, interestingly enough, she said that Andrea wanted to speak to me, so we had a phone conversation and talked forever. And from that day on, it was literally almost every other day, if not daily, we would speak. And so she knew that I was a sponge and wanted to hear all the stories and the oral history and everything about all the family. And she's a historian herself, so she wanted to share that information. And it didn't seem like anybody else was really wanted to take on that task. So I was extremely lucky to have had her contact me, and we're still doing it today.
And you knew pretty much right away that you would volunteer whatever time you needed to help her get going with it.
Absolutely. I was like, let me do something. So now I do the Instagram and the Facebook and the website, and then kind of the book work of the grant money and the funds and where it goes and things like that. So Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing about this is that you were once living in North Carolina, and you would
was.
visit Asheville,
I did.
and you didn't know that all of this connection was there in Asheville. So, my
I did
question to
not.
you
Yeah.
is this, right? Like, I feel that sometimes you can go to spaces, and then there's just like maybe this weird connection that you may feel like you have, right? So when you would come, because you were in Charlotte, right?
Correct.
So when you would leave Charlotte and head on up the mountain, and when you were in Asheville, did you just look at it as like this cool, funky town, or did you ever feel anything when you were up there?
It felt like home. I mean, it was just, I'm an artist by trade. So for me, yeah, I loved the culture that was there and things like that. But it just seemed, like I was always drawn to Asheville. And interestingly, I was also drawn to Charleston. And my sister actually went to college at Charleston. And every time we were there, there was this sense of like there was something else, but I didn't know. And it all kind of comes full circle. Even today, when I come into Asheville, it just seems like there's this pull. I don't know, it's really hard to explain, but yeah, it always was way more. And it's so crazy because when I did visit Asheville, even when I was coming back from Florida trips or whatever, we would always stop at Asheville, and literally was like 2 blocks away from where Andrea lived.
Wow.
And
That's
and
wild.
walking through downtown and stuff, and I thought, oh my gosh, when she was telling me all this, I was like, this can't be real, like this can't be true. Excuse me. And so yeah, Asheville has a special place in my heart for sure.
Yeah. And so for some people that would look at you, there could possibly be some ambiguity that's there, right? And so did you know that you had African lineage in your DNA prior
was
to
never-
all of this?
No, there was always like an unspoken word. People would say things about my dad and his brother. It was one of those things that, oh, your dad his father was Creole or Bahamian or Polynesian, all these, fancy whatever.
Oh, the
it was
exotic,
never-
quote unquote exotic.
Yeah,
things,
right. Not black, but we're
Right,
going to
not
go with
black.
Polynesian. But it was one of those elephant in the rooms where nobody ever really surely said anything. Clearly people knew more than what they wanted to say. And now, after years of convincing that I believe my dad knew more than what he told us as well. So there was always that question. My dad and his brother looked a little different than all the other folk in in his side of the family, So when I did the DNA test, I wasn't surprised. It was really clarifying for me. It did make me sad to think that my dad wasn't alive for us to discuss it,
Sure.
because I feel like he missed out on all this great legacy,
Yeah.
of the family in Asheville. And he was always drawn to North Carolina as well. He did know that he had a grandmother named Ida in Asheville, but he thought his dad's name was Ted Carter, and it wasn't. It was Clark, Taft Clark. So, yeah, I think now, and there's been some, pushback from other family members that I guess don't think that my love for all of this is genuine.
Sure.
And even though they're not really interested in taking it over, per se,
You got to love those type of family members, right?
you do.
It's the
you do.
hypocrisy in it all.
There is. And I thought, well, nobody's knocking down the door saying, hey, we want to help, but they sure have a lot to say. But again, I think it's the colorism thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's funny because when I look at James, clearly when you see a photo of him, when I first was sent a picture of him, I was like, who's this white guy, right? Wait a minute, what? Blue eyes and light colored hair and very light skin. So I'm sure that was a challenge for him at that time too. You're marked You know, yes, you're in the black community, but you clearly know that you've got white in you, and it was from slavery, and whether it was love or force, it's, you know, it's still it's carried on. So that's like an underbelly too in America that is never really discussed in the white community.
Yeah.
All the nuances that go along with colorism and stuff like that. So I feel it today, but it is what it is.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
You had mentioned legacy, and I think that at this point of time in our lives, I mean, I'm 45. Ali, you don't have to say your age because
I
I
won't.
know that that's against the rules. And Cal is getting
I'm an
closer
open
to
book
40.
though.
Yeah, she is. Cal is getting closer to 40. And when we talk about legacy, I think that it means something completely different than what it may have meant in our 20s and our teens and stuff like that, right? So
Absolutely.
your grandfather, your great grandfather, definitely left a huge legacy in Asheville. And do you mind talking about a couple of those things? And I'll kind of prompt one of those questions. And that question is, he was in the process of building probably the only interracial community in the South in the 1940s.
25,
1925. 1925, when we know during that time period it was a huge no-no
It was a huge
because
no-no.
of everything
Yeah.
that was happening with Jim Crow and everything, black codes and stuff like that.
Right.
And then, of course, the buildings that he was part of erecting there in Asheville. So, if you do mind leaning into discussing his legacy
Sure.
there?
Yeah, so not only did he do commercial construction, all his sons, as well as himself, did a lot of homes, mostly for like older, maybe more established white families, all throughout Asheville, you know, nice 2-story homes. But he had black and white workers working for him. So, and he obviously felt that they needed housing that they could afford, and that he felt that they should all be able to live in the same community. They work together. They should be able to come home and live in the same community. So Brickyard Road, which is on West Asheville, was a subdivision that was developed with, oh my gosh, I think it was 40 plus homes. I'd have to verify that for sure. I have the plot that he built, and they were 2 and 3 bedroom little brick houses. And he rented, or if they could purchase, or rent to own or whatever, all these homes for his workers. So he had black and whites living in a neighborhood that they felt safe in and could work together, and their kids could play together. Of course, they weren't going to the same schools at the time or anything like that, but
Sure.
that was a really bold move and a very entrepreneurial spirit, I feel, too. I mean, I was reading an interview that Annie Mae had done with D. Williams in Asheville. This was back in the 80s. And Annie Mae was saying that her dad, you know, if a white person came and said, hey, we want you to build our home, he'd be like, absolutely. And then if a lesser income black family would come to him and say, could you pour a foundation for us? He would say, yes, but I'm not charging you. And so he did all this sort of work so that way it would make it a little bit easier for people, because he was very humble, but yet he also wanted to share, you know, the fruits of his labor.
Yeah.
So I feel like he was really, I think he saw how the white community treated him, right? When he was around white folk, they treated him, but he knew where he was from. And so a lot of the oral history that I read, it's very interesting how he moved in that society back then. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is that with the neighborhood that he did, if they couldn't afford their rent, he would just be like, that's okay. You know, just work a couple more hours or help me out with this, or I'm going to go, you know, and every year he would do pigs and coleslaw and all this stuff, and he gave all this food to the community and stuff. So, you know, there's just this sense of him, you know, only going to 3rd grade, didn't know how to read or write. His wife, Violet, taught him how to read or write, like at 18 or 19 years old. And then was able to have the knowledge to literally construct these buildings. Now, of course, he worked with architects and whatnot, but there's also some oral history that I read where he would come home at night and he would sketch a building that somebody had spoke to him that he wanted to do, and he would know exactly how many bricks that building would take, and
That's
he
amazing.
knew exactly how long it would take. And he didn't do any of this formal stuff, but he would go the next day and he would show this prospective, employee or client, this is what I can do and this is the price. And they're like, well, don't you need to go talk to the brick people and make sure you know exact? Nope. I mean, and if it was not enough or too little, he would, change that. So it was just very humbling to read stuff like that, knowing that none of this was learned in school. It was just sort of innate, I think, with him. So.
He was a brick prodigy.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'm still learning a lot too about, like, he was a 33rd degree Mason and all these things. And, you have to go through these processes to be able to become a 33rd degree Mason, and the skill that's behind it. Two of his sons were as well. So I'm still kind of learning about that. It's an interesting, because that was really big, the Eastern Stars for the women, and so, but it's hard to find information. There's just so much lacking.
Where are you looking to find that information? You said oral histories or?
Well, I've actually been trying to go to like different websites. I've sent emails to Masonic groups, Black Masonic groups, but there's just a lot of, and there were so many different chapters too.
There were a lot of chapters. There still are a lot of chapters.
So I'm trying to find the ones, because in the newspaper it'll say, he was visiting Durham for, a conference for the Masons and stuff.
Oh.
So he was pretty high up. He was traveling all over the state. This was probably in the late 20s, early 30s. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. What coming back to Asheville then, what are some of the buildings that are are part of the trail?
Yeah, so a lot of this is focused on the East End. Andrea had really wanted it to be a walkable trail, get people out walking, seeing stuff. And so the East End, which the East End, for folks that don't know, was pretty much Asheville's Black Wall Street. I mean, there was buildings, churches, salons, nightclubs, libraries, doctor's offices. So this whole area was the Black community's go-to spot for the city. The YMI was sort of like the anchor, I believe, in that town or in that community. But one of the first ones that I believe that he built was St. Matthias, which is actually the church where he was a head warden at.
Is that the one
and
that
it's
sits on top of the hill?
That's the church on the hill.
I love that
And
church. It's just got the most beautiful view.
Have you been inside?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
How did I forget that? One of my favorite places in all Asheville. The view is stunning. And to know that when you look down from there, which was where urban renewal just destroyed that whole neighborhood. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So St. Matthias, which is, I believe, one of the first churches that he did, Hopkins Chapel, the YMI, which was the Young Men's Institute, Mount Zion, which to me, I think that, and St. James AME Episcopal was probably, to me, one of the more extraordinary visual masonry work that he did. The St. James is three-dimensional, which takes a lot of skill to be able to figure out how to do that. So that one to me is probably visually one of my favorites to look at as far as the artistry behind that, the craftsmanship. But the J.A. Wilson building, the Asheville Municipal Building, which is still used to house the Asheville Fire Department. Yep. There is a plaque that Andrea had put on the outside of the door, but he was really known for his cornucopias, which is kind of like the half circle that goes above the doorways. They were very ornate. So a lot of people would say, oh, that's a Miller building, because you can see the cornucopias. Let's see. Another spot on the trail is where his office originally was, which is 22 Pack Square, which now has the big Jackson building. But that on that corner was his original office. And it's actually where Thomas Wolfe's father office was as well. So, he was in buildings and working around white folk the whole time. So, that's, to me, knowing how things were, I can't imagine that he didn't get pushback from some, but he, stood his ground and did what he had to do. But
Sure.
But the trail, there's so many more places, of course, but there you'd have to drive to them throughout the city. But Andrea did a phenomenal job with saying, okay, these are 9 spaces where people can walk to in about an hour or so. And a lot of people in Asheville probably drive by these places and have no clue.
No clue.
Maybe don't care. I don't know. So for folks that are coming from out of town who are into the historical things and architecture, things like that. The Scottish Rite Temple, also the Masonic Temple. He did that. There's so much, but the trail is walkable. There's a really awesome brochure that gives little descriptions of each church. It's also on our website. Explore Asheville has a really nice kind of interactive walking. You can walk with it, and it's really interactive. So there's a lot of different resources to be able to do the trail. I mean, and it's drivable or bikeable. I don't know. The hills in Asheville are pretty rough, but I would probably walk or drive. But and we also throughout the year have had to where we've worked with the churches and buildings to say, we're going to have from this time during the day where they'll open up the churches so folks could come in and see, which has been really interesting as far as the ages or the types of folks that actually come and see. I was really surprised. But again, it's just a matter of trying to educate people about what this one particular man and his workers and his family gave to Asheville visually, and that all these buildings, a lot of them were torn down, but these buildings are fairly in really good shape, except a couple churches. They need some structural things done in roofs and stuff like that. But we're just really excited, and we're grateful that the Urban Trail added him to their Urban Trail for Asheville, and he's number 28. And it's actually in the sidewalk right next to the Jackson building.
Jackson building, yeah, I've seen that.
One of the
building, one of my favorite, and this is solely from a symbolism standpoint, is it Mount Matthias? Matthias. So just to give you all a visual, like it's literally sitting on top of like this hill, if you will, and it's high up, right? And right below that, where the former enslaved quarters were.
Yep.
Like directly across the street from it, at the bottom, at the valley of it, was where the enslaved quarters were. And there's a marker that's there. It needs to be upfitted. Kyle, I had you get the. Remember, I had to get you to get the panel. So like when you,
I didn't realize that's where I was.
So if you did a 180 turn, if you did a 180 and you looked up, you would have saw the church, and it's looking down right over that. And I just think, from a symbolic standpoint, and I just think like this, and I mean, but I mean, it's just so powerful to see that shortly after emancipation, right above where these individuals were enslaved humans who didn't have autonomy over themselves, this building was erected, and it was for them to go to, and just the community to embrace and enjoy. So that, man, from a symbolic standpoint, that's one of my favorites for sure.
It's interesting too. There's a lot of really, I won't get into it because it's pretty lengthy, but St. Matthias has a really rich history as well. it used to be called the Freedmen's Church. And so there's this, you know, it used to be all white. They decided to, you know, I think they even, yeah, it was given to them, the land. But it's just very interesting. But you're right, Frederick, that is a very symbolic location. There was a school there at one point too, that has been since tore down many years ago. But and when you're up there and you look around, and then the inside is just,
it's beautiful,
phenomenal.
Cal, I'm gonna have to get you in there one day, man. You'll really enjoy it, just from the architectural standpoint, and the stained glass and everything that's
The
in
woodwork.
there.
Yeah, I saw the photos.
It's beautiful.
It's stunning. It's stunning, and it's an all-inclusive. The church, and even to this day, it's very, you know, fighting racism, and all are welcome, and it's just a really, really spiritual, lovely space.
Yeah.
I feel like that's fits the theme for Asheville in general, right?
It does. It really does. And you know, all these churches, and that's one of the things that's kind of scary too, and I guess it's just the time, you know, there's such a lack of parishioner base now, because a lot of the older folks and the baby boomers and stuff, they're, you know, their kids and grandkids aren't going to church. And so a lot of these places, hopefully will all be on the Register of Historical Places. So there'll at least be some sort of sense of trying to keep them instead of getting torn down and putting up an apartment complex or something crazy. So that's why I think it's important that this stuff is documented. And I love that it's on Hometown Chronicles, because it is a hometown story.
Yeah.
And it's an expansive story that so many, I mean, there's a lot of people in Asheville that have probably never heard of James Miller.
Sounds like we need to get the filming, Cal. I mean,
you know,
Sure, yeah.
but we already have so many projects. They were it's like, what's one more, right? Let's throw it on there.
Yeah, add it to the YouTube channel. You said there's other buildings too that are not a part of that trail.
Is
it a lot?
Well, there's probably 5 or 6 that we know of, like other churches. The Asheville Post Office was one that he did, but it has been since torn down. Let's see, Hill Street School. Oh my gosh, there's and I'm finding more from when I'm looking through all these notes of oral history that Andrea has so graciously let me comb through, and I'm seeing, oh wait, he built that, and then when I'm driving around Asheville with her, she'll say, oh, you know, Juanita told me he built that. And I'm like, that's not on our sheet, you know. But see, none of this, Kyle, was really documented through the city.
Right.
The only thing you'll find is who the architect was and who, like, he was probably considered more of a subcontractor versus the main people. I don't know, but clearly he was. But he was black, and so we couldn't give you that recognition. You know, Richard Sharp Smith was there. You know, so, and just hearing or reading what I'm seeing that his daughter had said, that, you know, every street you went on, there was something that Paul built. So whether it was a house, now there are houses that are still standing that he had built, and I've been able to go through, and there's over, oh my gosh, 230 properties of transfer that I found just within the Buncombe County deeds office.
That he
Thank
owned?
God is online. Yes, that
Wow.
he had purchased and transferred. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that where the Asheville baseball field is, there was 10 acres there that was originally Ed Miller's, which was one of his sons. And it was crazy how they'd be swapping, you know, properties back and forth to people for whatever reason. But that was originally, it should be called Miller Stadium is what it should be called.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, there's a lot. And the Varick Chapel, which is, I don't know if that's considered South Charlotte. I don't know where South Charlotte begins. Do you know, Frederick?
Where South Charlotte begins?
Yeah,
oh,
like,
you're talking
where
about the
does that-
street Charlotte. You're talking about Charlotte Street there in Asheville?
No, it's Verritt Chapel. It's off Broad, French Broad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know where French Broad is. Yeah, yeah.
But is that considered South Charlotte or South Asheville?
Asheville. Yeah, I was like, that's where you were throwing me off.
Where are we at now?
I was like, because no, the thing is because there's Charlotte Avenue that's there,
right? I know,
right
I know.
next to
right.
Mount Moriah. Yeah, right next to where some of the things
So
that we were talking about.
that's a really big church that he did.
Yeah.
One thing, we don't have actual documentation, but the Haywood Street Church, which is like right when you're coming in off the highway, we were told that he built the tower, not necessarily the original part of the church, but he actually helped build the big tower. Now, Haywood Street Church is really a really giving church. They help the less fortunate and needy, and Christopher Holt did a phenomenal original type fresco in there. And Andrea, of course, popped in one day and was like, my grandpa built that. And so he's like, wait, what? So he modified his fresco when they were painting it to add initials of JVM along with like, a leather bag with tools, showing that, he was the mason. And it's a phenomenal fresco. But beautiful. So yeah, there's just still a lot. And unless I have like weeks and weeks that I could just dig into all these different areas, with the deeds office and special collections, and I'll probably never know all the things that he has done. And that is a mystery that I'm, always trying to follow, because I keep thinking I'm still going to find more. There's got to be documentation somewhere. But
well, that's what I was going to ask. Are you still finding more buildings that he's tied to?
Well, just 2 days ago, I didn't realize that he did the Hill Street School.
Oh wow!
So I read that.
Is that school still standing, or?
I think there is. I don't know if it's the original one though. I think one. Yeah. But for me to say that he built it, a lot of us, we do have to go on oral history. I always want to see something in black and white.
Yeah.
Which is really hard when it comes to Black history. Mm-hmm. We rely on a lot of the history that our families had, said to somebody, and then it's carried on. But we'll see.
that school is tied to Dixon as well. What's his name? Golly.
Okay, there was Pearson,
Isaac
Dixon.
Yeah,
Isaac
Dixon, yeah.
Which is really cool because, there's a lot of things that some of these men and women, oh my gosh, were just like really influential.
Yeah.
And bold. And he ran with all those folks. One of my favorite pictures, which is the iconic picture that everybody always sees with Pearson and Dr. Leotis Miller and James Miller standing in front of the YMI. Mm-hmm. That's sort of like the iconic, Black Wall Street, Asheville shirt or image. And, they just all, when you go to Burton Street and you go to different areas in Asheville and you hear about what they did. And so, yeah, they all in their own right are just legends, really. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to do that today with the resources that we have, let alone back then, so, yeah. My great-grandpa was cool.
He was a pretty dope guy, that's for sure. Well, it's always refreshing for us to be able to, sit down with folks. And, our last episode, we talked about our hometowns, places that shaped and molded our personalities and our interests and things that, we're still interested in, of course, in learning about, going back and kind of recanvassing what we didn't necessarily think about as kids and now finding more information out. And so now to have the opportunity with this platform to bring people on, such as yourself, in which you are our very first guest. So give it up for her for that.
Thank you.
It's always great to hear the progress and the things in which people are doing to preserve things within their hometown or towns in which they're associated with. So We greatly appreciate you for joining us on today. And do you mind letting the audience know where they can find your work and what may be coming up next?
Yes. We have a website, jamesfestermiller.com. I can also be followed on Instagram at James Miller Asheville. James Fester Miller. That's terrible. I should know that. James Miller.
We'll put it in
James
the notes.
V. Miller
We'll put
Asheville.
it in the
I know I have a whole
description.
bunch. I will say though that this month, along with Andrea Clark's photography being exhibited at the Asheville Historical Museum at the McDowell House, they also have the Jenny Pickens mural that she did through Arts AVL. That is now it's a traveling mural of the historical traveling or the historical walking trail. So it has left Silsa in Asheville, which was a school, and now is at the Historical Asheville Museum on display there. So for folks to go in and see not only Andrea's second exhibit that's starting in this month, they'll get to see the traveling historical mural by Jenny Pickens. And just do some research. There's we're on Facebook too, but the North Carolina architects and builders was something that I found. There's just so many craftsmen that just don't get the notoriety that they deserve. That built this, all the communities really. I don't care where you're at. And I never thought I would be so into brick. I mean, metal's my thing, but I now look at brick in a different way. Even in my own, even here in Richmond, I look around and I'm like, that doesn't look so good. I mean, I compare things now.
Yeah, now you got to compare them to great granddaddy. So,
and I just feel like for kids, we see stuff just getting thrown up overnight and then torn down in 20 years and rebuilt. And some of these buildings are over 100 years old and they're still standing strong. And so the craft part of it, to me, it really intrigues me. And I hope that, looking at it now, my kids at least look at buildings like brick buildings as art versus just a building.
Yeah.
And so that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's maybe part of the aspect of those old buildings that ties you and I to it, right, Murph? I mean, our floors are all plastic and mass produced now, and you look at these old buildings and they've got character. You can almost feel the people that put them together and the effort that went into it.
Well, there was pride. There was pride. Oh, there's also at the Craft Museum in Asheville, there's a little display of James Miller too.
Okay.
So, yeah. But
a lot of things for people to be able to
and it's free.
Visit and look for the free 99. You got to appreciate that. That's for sure.
Yes.
So everyone, we thank you for checking us out today or tomorrow or whenever you actually listen to this. We will leave some information in the description of this so you'll know where to follow Ali, and big shout out to Andrea for getting things rocking and rolling.
Yes.
And this will not be the last time that you see this trio together, I am sure. So you got anything else, Cal? Are you good to go?
No, I've got nothing else. You pretty much said it.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone for checking in.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Peace.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us again on Hometown Chronicles USA. If you loved this episode, be sure to check out our YouTube channel and social media. Subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Show notes and all things Hometown Chronicles USA can be found at our website, hometownchroniclesusa.com.
I think it's my time